Welcome to this week's episode of our Arthritis at Home program. My name is Maya, and I'm the program coordinator at Arthritis Consumer Experts. I'm so excited to be joined here today with Nevena Rebić to discuss the next generation of health researchers and clinicians. Nevena is a graduate trainee at Arthritis Research Canada and a student at the University of British Columbia Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences, where she's committed to serving at least a decade-long sentence. She previously completed a 5-year Bachelor of Pharmacy and is about to wrap up a 2-year MSc and will be starting a PhD in September. At her core, she's a lover of learning and supporting individual and community level empowerment. In recent years, she's become a lover of public health research because of the opportunity it presents to marry evidence-based decision-making and social justice. In her research, she combines her clinical expertise to inform patient-centered questions in arthritis, pregnancy, and medication use. And she's excited to spend 4 more years learning from and supporting health empowerment within the arthritis community. Thank you so much for being on our program today, Nevena.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this.
Great, it's our pleasure. So first of all, I would love it if you could tell us a bit more about the PhD program that you are entering this fall.
As you know, I've spent 2 years working with Dr. Mary Devera, focusing on medications and pregnancy for women with RA. And the decision to continue a PhD was mostly a relational one. I've had a great time with Mary. I've had a great time kind of connecting with the arthritis community and also expanding to some other kind of areas in what we deem passion projects. I'm excited to see what the next 4 years is going to be, what will actually end up the thesis project, and sort of what other experiences I'll have along the way.
I know also from following your social media that you have a strong interest in incorporating social justice, anti-racism, decolonization practices into your research. Can you tell me more about what this means?
I guess for me, as a researcher, I'm still feel like I'm a novice and I'm figuring that out. And for me, a large kind of part of the years that I've spent in academia have been always kind of complemented with a lot of service work, leadership work, and kind of community work. There's so much that I learned from sort of those experiences that may not have necessarily been touched on in the classroom. And I feel like for a long time, especially through my pharmacy degree, which was quite a challenging program, when I often reflect on how did I get through that, it was really, I feel like it was the extracurriculars that kept me going as opposed to this like innate kind of motivation to be in the books and to do your standardized exams and testing. And so I think when I stumbled onto research in, I think it was my 2nd year, I got a position with the contraception and abortion research team at BC Women's Hospital, and working on a project that was kind of looking into how the implementation of this novel medical abortion medication that had, years of efficacy and use in other countries like France and the US, how it was being implemented into Canada, and how what barriers to access there were and how could we dismantle those with research and policy working together. And it was like this realization, I think, working with this team and this amazing group of women researchers, advocates, clinicians, that like what research can do is bring about change, and it can bring about change in a very informed way. I feel like all this learning that I did about where we are in terms of women's rights, in terms of LGBTQ rights, in terms of just all these health inequities that we see, it has been outside of the classroom. And so for me, I think it's really important to bring that stuff in, because it didn't, from someone who likes to kind of mind map and kind of understand concepts from there within, like it doesn't make sense to learn about research without understanding the history. It doesn't make sense to to do kind of medical research and do public health research without understanding who you're serving.
Everything you're saying is so true. It is such valuable insight. What are ways then that people can incorporate social justice, anti-racism practices into their research?
I was thinking about how like our public health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, has been explaining sort of the modeling for COVID. and how we have these models that try to predict kind of what we should do, what our actions should be in order to get to a certain outcome. And these models are as good as the data that we use, right? And so if we're not incorporating, if our testing isn't up to some level, if we're not incorporating, if our data is somehow incomplete, what our conclusions are going to be just as incomplete. And so to me, it's the idea of not like at the end of a research paper saying, we did this research and we came to these conclusions, but we recognize there's a limit because we didn't talk to these people, this group that are affected by this potential change that we're, or a potential kind of area that we're addressing. And for me, it's really about incorporating those people early on so that when you're doing your research and you're kind of looking at this problem and you're asking this question, you are doing it with kind of your end user in mind. I think there's this concept called end user design, where if you're creating something for a particular group, you engage that group. And I think that's very much what kind of engaging patients early on in your research means. A second thing that I would love sort of clinicians and researchers to do is to do community service work and do the learning that comes through the application of those concepts and through learning from the people that you are hoping eventually to serve. Immersing yourself in those concepts, I think, is critical. And continuously, what we do in qualitative research is we think about reflexivity. And so it's this idea of reflecting on what your biases are, what your assumptions are, and how are they contributing to what you're saying. Because, there's a history of using science to support racism. There's a history of science being used to kind of create these false narratives of like, what is the difference between white and Black people. As a researcher, you have a duty to understand not just what your intentions are, but what the impact of your actions are.
Yeah.
And what the impact of the type of work that you're doing, who is it serving, who is it not, how you are meeting a particular standard with working with that group. And when you facilitate something, you are not coming in as an expert, but you're coming in with someone with some degree of knowledge, and you're hoping to continue this conversation with people who have personal lived experience or who have their own expertise. It can be frustrating to kind of wait for your society to catch up. We need to catch up. It's our duty to catch up.
I also really like how you touched on the importance of being reflexive. I think that there's this misconception that science and research is objective, but as we know, is not the person who is conducting that research, completely, without their own awareness, they're adding in their own biases, their position, their identity into that. And as we know, as you talked about, that makes it really important to think about your own position in relation to the people that you are conducting research with, especially if it's qualitative. So I love that you touched on all those things.
Yeah, and I think even quantitative. I think researchers have a duty of self-awareness.
How do you hope that health research will progress or advance in coming years? What opportunities do you see for change in this field?
Just reflecting again on the amount of learning that I've learned outside of the classroom, one of my hopes and kind of dreams is to really bring a lot of that into the kind of traditional spaces of learning, because there's a barrier to accessing information in sort of non-traditional classroom settings. There's additional work you are asking for the individual to do to go out and seek those opportunities and do that learning and to unlearn what you have institutionalized in them. So my big hope is that we bring a lot of this idea of decolonizing curriculums into our classroom spaces, whether that's researchers or whether that's clinicians. And I know that even our institution, UBC, has done a lot of work with its healthcare systems, and healthcare programs, and I've been a part of this, where they facilitated sort of like an adjacent program that creates an interdisciplinary space for all these healthcare students to kind of discuss ideas of resilience and mental health and Indigenous cultural safety. And I think this is a fantastic start. But I also understand what it's like to be a student who has this key curriculum that they're on, that they're taking quizzes every day, that they are being graded on, and then there's this program that they just need to pass. And how much of a barrier that can be for a student to fully engage there if they are already struggling to be part of a very intensive program in itself. And so I want to see a lot of that stuff just build into the core of what we are learning. I want to see it embedded, and I want to see it kind of all kept at the same kind of value and level, so that it's not something that's kind of adjacent to what the norm is. It is thoroughly kind of embedded in what we do. And I've seen a lot of kind of a push for that in terms of incorporating a Black history curriculum in our high schools. And I was like, that would be great, because I learned about the trade for Canada's fur trade for 2 years, and all I remember is like beaver pelts. Like, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to kind of take the white lens out of how we teach. And I feel like education, especially because it was so empowering for me to get my education and to continue learning. And I know how much that has changed, and how I make my decisions, and how I set boundaries in my life, and how I feel like I have agency and I have control. And I feel like that needs to be embedded throughout our system. And I think it starts earlier than sort of learning how to be a clinician and learning how to be a researcher. It starts very young, because the research shows that, these biases and these assumptions, they are indoctrinated in us. They are, they come from our environment, and kids pick them up really young. Looking at different ways of doing research that brings it to the community, as opposed to them coming to you, because that's a ivory tower boundary. We talk about working with Indigenous communities and going into their spaces and getting permission to go into their spaces. So it's a lot of it's a lot of feminist theory. It's consent. It's understanding of intersectionality. It's understanding that there's histories of distrust in the medical and the research system, and that can't go away with you one day you as a researcher saying, wait, I'm now interested in working with you, because the funding companies, the funding agencies are interested in you applying an intersectional lens. It's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of humility. And I'm really kind of excited to be a part of that, and to see kind of what other steps come out. Yeah.
Thank you for that very well said answer. I think that those are all really important parts of continuing to improve the space of health research and healthcare, and ensure equity to the greatest degree. So lastly, what I would be interested also from myself personally as a student, I would love to know what advice you have for students who are interested in pursuing grad school research in this area, in this health field.
I think I'll start with just research in general. Dip your toes in early. I did a number of kind of directed studies projects, and my work with the contraception abortion team was a work-learned position through UBC. So there are a number of sort of avenues for you to kind of get a feel for what research is and see if it works for you through having those experiences in your undergrad. And I would say, even although I was never good at this, but I've seen people do it well, where connecting with your profs and asking them about what they're doing and just communicating your interests. I know that a lot of the students that I end up working with are people who reached out to my supervisor and were like, I'm really interested in your work and I want to learn more, and we're extremely persistent. And that is a little bit of also a boundary of, there are so many students and you need to somehow kind of make yourself seen. And the hardest part is the first step of when you don't have any research experience, and kind of who's going to allow you that opportunity to kind of dip your toes in. But after that, I feel like it gets easier. So I would say get a feel, kind of explore different types of research, get a feel for what you like, get a feel for what you can stand doing. Understand that there is this, that your work is valued, that your contributions are valued, that with our research assistants and graduate students and undergraduate students, research would not get done. And so understanding that you're getting adequately sort of validated and acknowledged for your work, whether that is if you're working on a paper, getting authorship or acknowledgement, getting compensated for your work. There's so many inequities with how do we expect people to have certain like volunteer or research experiences when we don't compensate them well enough. And especially coming from communities who are low income, who struggle with different things, who need to spend their time making money to be able to get an education and pay for it. So understanding, I think it is a lot of trying to setting standards for yourself, and understanding who is actually going to prop you up and build opportunities for you, and where you're going to get the most sort of validation for your value. And that can be extremely challenging because academia is not a just system. And those positions come with barriers. Those opportunities come with barriers, and there are going to be people who have more privileged positions who it's going to be easier for. And I think that's a give and take that you have to kind of reconcile with. But I will also say that on the other end of that, there are amazing supervisors. I'm going into my PhD with my eyes shut because I have a supervisor who I've seen is always looking for opportunities for me to shine, who understands me as a person and supports both not just my academic work, but my personal life and my personal goals and my mental health, and who understands that because I love to dip my toes in different projects, allows those opportunities for me and kind of builds a space where I really don't know how to leave because I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to build a working environment, to build a career like this, or to work in an environment that allows me to really just dive into things really deeply, or just take time to really learn about something to read and then come back and to apply it. So understanding what your values are too, and kind of what you need to really thrive even under pressure, even in your later life. But I felt like a lot of feeling confident and feeling secure in where I'm at and what I'm doing came with a lot of hard work of really unpacking sort of just all that emotional labor of unpacking sort of what my values are, what's at the core, and how do I align my actions with my values. I think it's about balance.
Yeah, well, I love that. And Nevena, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights with us today. I can't wait to rewatch this and learn from you again, because I know this was such valuable information that you've shared with us. I love talking to you about this topic, and I know that many of our viewers will feel the same way. So thank you again so much for joining us. And I just want to say to our viewers, please feel free to leave any feedback that you have on our social media. And don't forget to tune into future Arthritis at Home episodes. Thank you so much again to everyone watching, and to Nevena, our wonderful guest for today.
Thank you for having me.